There's been a lot of difficulties with the coronavirus and the response to it. I think one of the things that really gets on our nerves is, all the new rules and regulations, both on how we interact with one another and what things are open, where we can go, what we can do. No one really likes to be told what to do, and this time has really tested us and how willing we are to obey the different rules. It can feel really restrictive or oppressive to be told what you can and can't do. We sort of understand the point of trying to slow or stop the spread of a highly infectious disease, but we still, get a bit annoyed by all the new rules, especially here in America, where we've sort of built an identity around being the land of the free and the home of the brave. How are we free if we've got all these rules and restrictions? And that's a similar struggle, I think, that many have with Christianity. It's easy to view religion and Christianity as a list of do's and don'ts, 10 Commandments and things like that. But is Christianity just about doing the right thing? Is it just about believing and following the right set of rules? The Apostle Paul ended Philippians chapter 1 on a bit of a somber note regarding the gospel. He talked about, for him, life was all about sharing the gospel, the good news of who Jesus is, and that even death would be gain for him. And he tells the Philippians to accept suffering as part of living out the gospel. And that can be hard for us to hear. We're told that the gospel is good news, but what does it actually look like to live that out? Why should we do something that calls us to accept suffering and hardship? What's being a Christian all about? Getting into Philippians chapter 2, we start to read instructions and descriptions of the Christian life. Paul gives some instructions for how to live out the gospel. Now, that can get on our nerves a bit. As I said earlier, we don't really like to be told what to do and how to live. And often I think we get to passages like this in the Bible and we think, oh, this is just another list of rules and requirements. We may be tempted to read Philippians 2:14 sort of as a requirement for grace, where Paul says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. And it can sound like he's saying, if you complain or talk back, then you're not really a Christian. And so we come up against this question again, is the Christian life just about doing good things and obeying rules? The simple answer is no. But that can be hard for us to accept, especially when we get passages like this that look like a bunch of rules and instructions for how a Christian is to live. So how do we read all these laws and instructions in the Bible and not say that Christianity is about obeying rules? Well, we need to remember that the gospel is about a relationship. The foundation for following Christ, for being a Christian, is that we have a friendship with God. It's similar to why we obey all the rules and regulations surrounding coronavirus. It's not just that we could get in trouble with our government. It's more that we want to care for our friends, our family, and our neighbors so that we don't spread the suffering caused by this virus. Faithful obedience comes from a caring relationship. For Christians, that relationship starts with God. And that's what we talked about last week, God's parent-child relationship with us. That relationship of peace and security that leads to flourishing. I think that's why the Apostle Paul focuses so much of the first chapter on the gospel, on the good news that Jesus makes it possible for us to be in the presence of God and experience His mercy and grace. If we just start the conversation at what a Christian does and how we should live, then we miss the boundless love of God. We need to start, as babies do, fully dependent on the love and kindness of their parents. God is our Father, and unlike the brokenness and pain that we may have with our own earthly fathers, God's fatherly care is perfect, and it's that ideal that we long for. Understanding that God is our Father and using this metaphor of a parent with their child helps us understand these passages where we have instructions on how to live. Just as the parent-child relationship develops as the baby grows into a child and then to a teen and into adulthood, so our relationship with God grows and develops. The foundation of God's love and acceptance remains while we grow in our ability to relate to God. And so as Paul goes into describing the life of the Christian in Philippians chapter 2, he keeps the gospel central. He describes what it looks like for a Christian to live out the gospel, while reminding us that the foundation of the gospel is what God has done for us. It's not about what we can do, about how good we can be, or about trying to earn or prove that we deserve God's mercy and grace. Instead, Paul describes the effects of the gospel in our lives, what God does with us in conjunction with our faith and repentance. He's telling us what it looks like to accept God's love and to grow in our love for God. Earlier we looked at Philippians 2:14, the command about not grumbling. And Paul follows it up by saying, we do that we may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Our relationship with God will be seen, but it's not about showing off how good we are or what we've done. It's about showing off who God is and how He has loved us. Our obedience to the laws and rules that we find in the Bible shouldn't be based on a need to prove ourselves. Instead, obedience is part of accepting God's love, knowing that we can't do it perfectly, but seeing how He has shown us grace, giving us Jesus' perfect record, and inviting us into His family. We obey as part of the family of God. Now that can be really easy for me to say, but it's actually really difficult to do. And even though I say it, I don't always understand what that will look like from day to day and the different circumstances of my life. And so I'd invite you to join me this week in studying Philippians chapter 2 and thinking about living out the grace of the gospel. Let's read together this chapter. I'll put the reading guide and study questions in the video description below, and I'll also post them over on the Liberty River Ward's Facebook page. So please do join me in looking at this chapter this week. Feel free to leave a comment here or over on Facebook if you have any questions or would like to share a thought. And let's study this together. Thanks, and God bless.